Hello and welcome, students, to another episode of History at Home. In today's episode, we're going to talk about a term that we've been using quite a bit in class, and that's the word civilization. So, what makes a place a civilization? Like always, we're going to start off this video by going over some of the things that we have discussed together in class. Over the past week, we've really hammered away at this. We know that humans discovered agriculture in a historical region known as the Fertile Crescent around the year 10,000 BCE. And agriculture and having the ability to grow a surplus of food totally revolutionized and totally changed the way humans live. For example, we start to see people living in permanent settlements, and as more people live in one location permanently, we see these small towns turn into villages and eventually grow into cities. We also know that unlike hunters and gatherers, we don't need to have everyone involved with food production. So, hunters and gatherers, your job pretty much was to gather food for everyone else. You were either hunting it if you were a male or gathering it if you were a female. Well, now we don't need everyone involved in the food production process, so we'll see new jobs begin to emerge. And in order to survive in this new complex way of living with a lot of people in one location, we start to see governments form, and they will start developing laws for everyone to follow in order to keep us safe from each other. Finally, this is going to be the birthplace of civilization in general, Sumer, which is the southern region of Mesopotamia. Keep in mind that the Fertile Crescent is this region right here that you see pictured on the map, and it really spans across from the Persian Gulf into Egypt. So if we zoom in, we would see these kinds of countries within the Fertile Crescent, and we would have seen some of the best farmland spanning from the Persian Gulf all the way across the Sinai Peninsula into Egypt. So this is a better map that kind of illustrates this point a bit further. We see from the Persian Gulf all the way into Egypt this really great farmland that would have been in what we would assume today is the Middle East. So the Fertile Crescent is the name given to a huge area of land where the world's first farming communities appeared. So within this green region, you would have found people living in permanent locations and practicing agriculture beginning around the year 10,000 BCE. At that same time period, if you ventured outside into this yellow region, you would still find people living a nomadic hunting gathering lifestyle. Today, this region includes modern day countries like Iraq, Iran, Syria, Lebanon, Egypt, Israel, Palestine, Jordan, and Turkey. So it's quite a big region. In fact, it goes across two continents from Asia all the way into northern Africa. We also mentioned that the name Fertile Crescent stems from two things. First, it's fertile. So it has some of the best farmland on the planet at this time period. And we said that name crescent refers to the shape of this region. It roughly looks like the crescent phase of the moon, or maybe the croissant that you eat at the cafe. It's got that very basic arc shape, so that's where the name Fertile Crescent stems from. Also, let's keep in mind that the Middle East may look like this today, but if you went back 10,000 years ago, you would have seen some of the best farmland on Earth within this green band across the Middle East into Africa. Okay, so let's get into the topic for today's video. What makes a place a civilization? To answer this question, historians have identified five key features or five key items that your civilization needs in order to be classified as a civilization. The first thing that we need to see in order to call you a civilization is feature number one, and that is a stable food supply. So, this is an idea that we should be comfortable with. A civilization must have knowledge of agriculture and they must develop a surplus. This is going to be the most important feature because this allows the other four features to develop within the civilization. So, step one to becoming a civilization is forming agriculture and forming that surplus. In Mesopotamia, the surplus that we gather and grow, we're going to store in a place called the granary, which is on top of this big building that you see pictured here called the ziggurat. So let's look a little bit further or a little bit more in detail with the ziggurat. First of all, notice this darker region at the very bottom of the ziggurat. That is the flood line. So that shows you really how high the Euphrates or Tigris River can flood. That's about 4 or 5 feet. So what we're going to do, all of this extra food that we can grow as a society, we're going to collect and we're going to store, and we're going to store it up high because the Euphrates and Tigris River do flood relatively high. So we're going to store it at the top of the biggest building within the city state, which is the ziggurat, and we're going to store it in a place called the granary. So that's what you see pictured right here is the granary where the surplus crops would have been on top of the ziggurat. So that was step number one, a stable food supply. Feature number two is a system of government. So within your city state or within your region, in order to start calling you a civilization, you need to display that you have a government. So a government starts to become a way of life and a necessity of life because we're living in those very tightly packed cities. The purpose of a good government is to organize, serve, and protect the citizens of the city state. And across the ancient world, whether it's China or Egypt or Mesopotamia, the most common form of government will be a monarchy. So we'll see a king and, in some rare cases, a queen at the top of society. We don't really see different forms of government appear until around 200 BCE in Greece, where we start to see different forms of government like oligarchies and democracy eventually appear. So that was feature number two, a system of government. Feature number three, specialization of labor. I know that term sounds like a mouthful. It's a really easy concept. The definition of specialization of labor is that you have people within your society mastering different jobs. So, agriculture allows us to master different jobs because not everyone is involved in the food production process. So, people can work different jobs. What we'll see appear in the ancient world are different jobs like a blacksmith, which you see here in this GIF, basket weavers, pottery makers, soldiers, farmers, government officials. All of this stems from agriculture and having someone being able to produce food for you so that you could work a different job. Just a quick note, in class, I will be using the term artisan. And an artisan is a profession in which you make something with your hands for a living. So a blacksmith would be classified as an artisan. A basket weaver would be classified as an artisan. A pottery maker can also be called an artisan. So that's kind of an umbrella term for these ideas. Feature number four that we need to see in your society is social levels. And this is a concept that you're probably already comfortable with. So what you see here, this triangle shape is called a social structure. It can also be called a social pyramid because it makes that shape. And within this social structure, you'll see different social classes. A social class is a division in a society based on social and economic status. So if we looked at Mesopotamian society, we would see different social classes. At the very top of society, so the person with the most wealth, the most power, and the most influence would have been the king and his close family. Below him would have been people like government officials, priests who keep the gods and goddesses happy, and wealthy landowners. A step below them would have been your blue collar jobs, professions like merchants who buy, sell, and trade goods, artisans, the people who make tools and stuff for a living, farmers who make food, and fishermen who get food from the seas and rivers. And then at the bottom, the dregs of society would be your slaves. And in the ancient world, slavery happens one or two ways. You're either a prisoner of war or you owe you a debt to someone, so you sell yourself into slavery to pay off that debt. So your social classes, the king and the government officials, those two would be the upper class. A notch below them would be the middle class, those blue collar jobs. And at the very bottom of society, the slaves would be the lowest of the low within society. So that's feature number four. Finally, the last feature we need to see in your society in order to call you a civilization is a highly developed culture. And we've talked about culture already in class. The definition of culture is the unique way of life for a group of people. So it includes items like religion and language. In Mesopotamia, we'll see a unique language called cuneiform, which means wedge shape. And you see all these little wedges. That's their written language. It's called cuneiform. We'll see different traditions emerge in your society, different cultural foods, stories that you may tell, like the Epic of Gilgamesh, which we'll read in class, different holidays you may celebrate, the values that the people within that region share, and customs that you guys all accept as normal. So, if we see a highly developed culture within your civilization, we're going to classify you as a civilization. So, just to summarize, the five features that you need are a stable food supply. You need to show a system of government. You need to have specialization of labor. You need to display social classes within your society. And finally, we need to see a highly developed culture emerge within your society. If you have those five ingredients, you'll be called a civilization. If you're lacking any of them, you are not classified as a civilization. All right. Thank you, students, for watching this video, and I will see you later in class.